right, what's up, Builder Group? So I'm Aaryaman, I'm one of the co-founders here, and welcome back to BuilderTalks, the podcast where we bring on some of the most seasoned individuals in tech and beyond to share nuggets on navigating the hurdles that young, ambitious people face. So today, I'm more than grateful to be joined by Hinson Chan. Hinson is an incredibly talented young builder who's done some exceptional work in the edtech space and beyond, and he's currently pursuing CS at Stanford. So, Hinson, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Hinson. I'm from Canada, from Vancouver, BC, which is rare. Not a lot of programmers from British Columbia or from Vancouver, really. I came along Builder Group. One of my friends, Alex, I'll talk more about Alex. He was very, very influential in my life. He brought me to Builder Group, met a lot of cool friends, a lot of people that inspired me to find I think a lot of new technologies at the time. That was super helpful. And then I programmed a lot more, met more friends, and eventually, after a lot of random various things we can get into later, I landed here at Stanford. So yeah, nice to be on here.
Awesome, awesome. No, fantastic. Okay. We'll start by going into your sort of background and then your journey thus far. And then we'll follow that up with a discussion on, Stanford and the Silicon Valley. And then finally, we'll conclude with, quick rapid fire round. Does that sound good?
Sure, yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, my first question to you, I guess, would be what sort of got you into building, right? What was that inciting point for you? And when did you start?
Okay. I mean, I think like when talking to people here at Stanford, it's very interesting because there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, I really want to get into CS," right? Like you'd probably expect that, right? And then they'd be like, "Oh, but I feel like I got into the scene too late." Right? Or like they look at everyone else who's been programming since they were like 6 or something, right? Like personally, my friend Alex, he likes to always say that he started programming when he was like 5 or something, and then it was that sort of thing between us that sort of got me competitive, right? But if I'm gonna be honest, I think I only started like getting really into programming and trying to learn how to build things when I was in grade 11. And so that's like pretty late, especially like, again, considering that most people start really young, right? And so I feel like, for me at least, in the last 2-3 years, that's really when I sort of learned a lot more about the programming space, about the environments, the technologies, things that we can do. And so I would say it really doesn't matter if you're like 5 or 6 years ahead, right? Because everyone has to continue to keep up, right? And so if you see all the technologies, they're always changing. And so it doesn't matter that someone's like really seasoned. Everyone has to keep up. So if you can just step in at any point in time and like you can learn the new technologies, right? And then you can always catch up. But for me, I'd say like back around grade 6, 7, 8, I think I already started using Scratch. You might have heard of Scratch. It's it's the block-based coding.
Yeah.
I think back then what was really funny was I thought Scratch was like the end-all be-all of programming. I was like, okay, I know I mastered Scratch, so I mastered programming. So at that time, I spent a lot of time building out really complex things. I think at some point I built like an animation engine or something on Scratch, and I thought like, Scratch can do everything. I don't need to learn any other languages, right? And then around grade 7, I was talking to Alex. He was like, you should try this thing called Python. And I was like, okay, I'll try Python. But I sucked at typing. Like that was one thing because I only got access to computers around grade 6. That was the first time, and my parents limited, so I can only use computers like an hour a day, right? And then around grade 7, grade 8, that was when COVID hit. And then my parents were like, okay, fine, we'll give them access for 2 hours a day. Because like I had to do classes, right? But then beyond that, and I didn't have time to do anything on the computer, right? Like if I wanted to like text people on Discord or like play Minecraft or something, that's all the time I had. So obviously I didn't have time to program, right? So during grade 8, 9, 10, really, I just did not have time to do anything because I didn't have access to computers, right? And so during that time, it was really just like I was barely in programming. Like I knew about it and I tried a few scripts, but like I wasn't, a programmer really. Until I think grade 10. Around then, I was talking to Alex because both of us we went to the same elementary school, and then Alex went off to another school and I went to public school. And in my public school, we didn't have that many programming classes. We had like one teacher and he taught really well, right? But beyond that, like beyond just that one class, you couldn't learn how to do web development. You couldn't learn how to do other languages beyond, I believe, Python, right? And so I was talking to Alex, and he was like, "Do you want to try like building something?" And so I think at that time, the first couple things we did were just collaboration projects between the two of us. We used Streamlit on Python. We were like, could we build something to get optical character recognition off of anime, I believe, and then like use some Google Translation API to do like automated like manga translation. I think that was one of the first things we did. And again, like those, I look back at the code like now, and it's like terrible, and like no one cared, right? Like both of us really enjoyed it. We enjoyed like talking to each other and calling. I think that was something that really like matters to me. Is like, I think building alone is kind of sad. I think it's always nice to see like get recognized for your work, but it's also much nicer to work on a team, I think, especially if you know your team very well. So me and Alex got to know each other very well. We've been programming for such a long time. Like he calls me out of my shit, I call him out of his shit. It's like it's a nice time, right? So I think that's like fundamentally how I got sort of more into programming. And then I think the other thing for me was just the fact that there was like no barrier to entry, really. So like the moment I got access to computers, and again, mind you, this is like way later than most kids start programming these days, right? I just realized like you can learn anything you want just if you have the time to do it. So once I like unlocked my parental controls thing, I had infinite time. That was when I like just realized, okay, I could learn anything. I could I could just clone any project. I can try running it locally, and it works, right? There's no like limit or barrier, right? Compare that to, for example, engineering. Like I know a lot of my engineering friends. They're saying like they're trying to catch up to, for example, the industry. They have to, when they want to work at a job, they spend all their time in university, because most kids, at least in Canada, right? Most kids don't have money to buy expensive motors or buy like those sort of tools, right? And so for those kids, it's really much harder to get a start into engineering unless you have the money for it. And so you feel sort of like, you feel lucky to when you're working in programming, right? And so like coming here to Stanford, I realized I talked to a lot of people, and it's like it's not just engineering; it's literally every profession. Think about how did you get started in like political science, right? If you don't have a mentor, if you don't have anything, it's like programming is the one of the only things that you can literally like start with nothing and get to it get to anywhere you want, right? So that's like super lucky. It's like to be in computer science, I think, right? Genuinely, it's like anything you see online, if you want to try replicating, you could actually try doing it yourself, right? So I think that was the other thing that inspired me. And so from there, I think I started doing a couple of YouTube videos. I think I wanted to try building some really bad code, but making it public so people could laugh at my code online. So one of the first things I tried was I built like a bot to help my dad book like golf courses, I think, because my dad wanted to buy golf, and he didn't want to wake up at 5, so I wrote something to get that. Again, really bad code. I think it was like Selenium. I think all my code was using XPaths. Like there was no if they changed if they moved the button 2 pixels, it probably would break. I don't know. And so the code is bad, but I enjoyed it. I put it on YouTube and it was fine, right? The other thing was I think I made a video that changed every day. That was something new. I watched the Tom Scott video and I was like, I can make a video that automatically accesses the YouTube editor and then cuts out sections and makes it so that does something cool every day. It's something different, right? So I did that and I sent it to Tom Scott and he was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And he posted on his newsletter. And I was like, wait, that's kind of crazy. Tom Scott posts my stuff on his newsletter. And so I think on that day, 10,000 people saw my video. And I was like, that's so cool. Looking back on it, that was genuinely some of the most atrocious code I've ever written. I'm not even joking. My method for doing it was I would control the mouse and I would click on the button. I would click on the timeline, and then I would click on the publish button. I'm not even saying find using query element or something. It's find the pixel. It's go to the pixel and click on it. Oh my god. So it was bad code, but I realized it half the time it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't, if it's for a video, if it's for something, it doesn't matter if it's good quality code or whatever. You learn with the process, and eventually now I'm like, okay, this is bad, and I know why it's bad, but at the time it was fine, right? So yeah, a couple lessons there. And then finally, I think hitting grade 11, that was when, around grade 10, grade 11 time, I got invited to a nonprofit starting from my high school, one of my friends. They were doing just tutoring. They're sort of like a tutor matching service at the time, and then they hired me knowing that I couldn't do anything, and they're like, oh, we want to expand our engineering team. And I was like, what?
Right.
Do you know what you're doing? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing either. Okay, so both of us, I invited Alex obviously because I needed a friend, and I invited another friend, Vincent. Both of them are cracked. Alex is now like doing crazy stuff at a local high school. My other friend is at Carnegie Mellon. So he's very cracked too. And I think like it was like the three of us that sort of like worked with each other, sort of spun ideas of each other, and like got really good together. I say all these like getting good is like it's not even like we're not experts by any chance. Like don't think of us as like super good programmers. We just know how to build some things, right? Anyways, so from there, I think the three of us, we worked with the team. At the time, this was. Oh, I'd like to say this is almost like pre-GPT or just as GPT is coming out, right? So this is really like we didn't know it, but it was going to be like a pivotal moment in programming. So I'd say like I'm lucky that I learned React and I learned like web development before GPT. Like now, like literally anyone can do it.
100%.
Like, anyone, yeah, right. And so I'd say like I'm glad that I got to know like my fundamentals before AI took over, because now like it's cooked. Literally like anyone can do it. But simultaneously, I'll get to it later. But like I think that it's really good that you learn your fundamentals without AI. Like it's you
100%.
can't get good at it. Anyway, so we both like at this summer, I think we learned how to do React over the summer. And I think within that summer, we're like, okay, we didn't even know what we were making, I think. I think at the time we were trying to build like a learning management system, so Google Classroom. We tried to build a clone of Google Classroom. The thing is, I think in that one summer, we made like 3 versions of the repository. we got to a certain point, and we're like, okay, this is cooked. We have to restart. So we restarted, and then by the end of the summer, we did this like 3 times already, because it was so bad. But like by the end, like you fail so many times that you realize, some things go certain places, right? So like that's how we actually got our start. It's again not efficient at all, but like you learn from trial by fire, right? And so I really think that like that really helped us. It made us think like, okay, it's not like there's always an easy way. I think a lot of people these days are like, oh, I want to find the easiest way to do something, so I'm just gonna let GPT do it, right? I think like if you really want to get good at it, you should try to learn on your own, and you fail a bunch, right? But you really should try to learn it. And so at that point, I was talking like I think we're still working on the learning management system idea. AI kicked in, and we're like, okay, can we expand this beyond just tutoring stuff, right? Yeah, so we started experimenting with this is really funny when I say this. Like, can we experiment with building tools for teachers to improve their lessons and like not have to spend so much time on administrative stuff? Which is really funny because a year later, Khan Academy comes up with the same product, and it's so every time I'm like, okay, one of these products that we've made, like a big company now has swooping in and like taken market share. Well, I don't care anymore. It's just funny, like thinking back on it. So we built that. It was just like a bunch of tools to help them, design quizzes much faster. They can put in their context and it generates that. This is again, right, mind you, like 1 or 2 years ago. This is like way back, like in programming terms. In programming terms, it's 2 years. And so we got to start there. And then that was when I sort of got my first like experience working with like LLM technologies. Again, I didn't have time to spend on like dig deep on how a transformer works. I think that's one of my biggest regrets is like working at a sort of startup pace. You do not have time to really dig deep on anything, which is why like coming here at Stanford, like the whole goal of me being here is like I want to like go back to like fix all my fundamentals, right? Make sure that I know what I'm doing. But yeah, so we started doing that, and then at the same time, this is like immediately as RAG comes out, we're like, okay, can we do something with RAG? So we tried a bunch of things with RAG, right? Now every company does that. But we were experimenting with new technologies and trying it out. And so yeah, I think that was pretty fun. But again, it's like always trying to find the newest thing and trying to experiment with it and see what other people have done. Like within a summer, like RAG goes obsolete and like new things come out and like new technologies go. The original RAG's thing is like way, way obsolete at this point, right? But always like trying new things, staying on top of the technology stack, I think is one of the lessons. And then obviously I got to grade 11, grade 12. That was when, university applications happened.
Right.
everyone gets worried about university applications. I think
Right.
like there's probably a bunch of people listening to this thing and they're like, oh, I'm applying to university next year. I want to get
Yeah.
into Stanford. Like, how do you get into Stanford? This is not going to be a university application thing. So many other people have done like how do you get university things. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
the only
yeah,
thing
for
I can
sure.
say is like, if you're a programmer, don't just talk about programming in your application. I think that's all I can say. I
Absolutely.
think on my application, like the amount of stuff I talked about programming was like 100 words out of like 2,000.
Right.
I think
Right. Be a
the
human.
key. Yeah, 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 no, that's really important,
Yeah.
right? I think like I talked more about GeoGuessr than like talking about programming,
Wow.
because like I felt like
Okay.
if you want to if you want to stand out in any of these things, you really just have to like find out what are you like different at, right? And depends
Right.
on the school. Every school has their own thing, right? But really like research your school and whatever. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to spend all my time on doing that.
No, yeah, for sure, for sure. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, so whatever. And by the way, I got rejected from every other school. So like the Stanford
I
is like
mean,
I
you
don't know.
got into Stanford, so you're good.
That's one of the schools, but like I'm gonna be honest. It's like
Yeah.
honestly, if you get rejected from it, and I've gotten rejected from literally every other school, I just don't take it personal. Okay, like you
Right.
could get in, and there's plenty of people that like deserve
Right.
to be here, right? It's literally just RNG. Like it's
Absolutely.
just
Yeah.
all random. Anyways, so yeah, so grade 12. I've been working at the startup then at that point for like now 3 years ish. And as we're doing this, we're always just trying to see what else we can do, right? I think like at that point, I was like, okay, I'm pretty solid on my like React Next.js. What else can I learn, right? And I think the goal of the startup, in any sort of startup, right, at least if I'm running it, is I want to see what else can I learn? Because it's not just about like again, also like building the best product, obviously, right? But like if you're building a product and you have an opportunity to like try new technologies, like of course try that, right? So I was talking with Alex, and I was like, both of us are running the show at this point, and we're like, okay, what other technologies can we try? And he's like, okay, and I literally just sent him on like a couple week journey to learn like to master Rust and build something using Rust because he really wanted to do it, right?
Right.
He loves talking about Rust. Anyways, so like I was talking to him, he was like, okay, so he just spent a couple of days like building some sort of technology that ended up helping us, right? And we're like, oh, that actually works really well to like get people to do these sort of side projects, maybe to contribute to the thing. But they own the
Right.
thing, they own their own project, and they get to do their own research, figure out exactly how to do it in the best possible way, right? And so at that point, I think what was really crucial is that I worked with him for so long that I really trust him, right? I trust him to like
Mm-hmm.
actually deliver something that worked.
Mm-hmm.
So having that sort of trust in someone, especially in projects,
Mm-hmm.
right? To just go out there and like figure out on their own and like come back, and we have discussion obviously, right? But not like micromanaging him or anything like that.
Right.
We
Absolutely.
just like I just let him do his thing, and then like he comes back and it's like amazing product, right? So
Right.
that ended up being our environment's variable manager. So we stopped relying on Railway to do
Okay.
all our environment variables. He just built this
Right.
thing that like syncs environment variables between all our like team members
Right.
and stuff. And it's amazing. It's a great project, right? And so I think yeah, at this point it's like all of us are more mature. I think more mature than we were 4 years ago. Still not the best. But the goal is always like try to find new technologies, try to find new things to do. Like I'm here, I'm working on a rover. I think it's a
Wow.
Mars rover. We're trying to go to Antarctica next year. We're trying to like there's a path
Right.
between two bases. One is like on the edge, and one's at the South Pole. And there's a like path that we're trying to have it follow. So the idea is we
Right.
go to Antarctica, we deploy the rover, and it goes there, right?
Right.
The whole time, I think leading up to this point, right? I wasn't just working on web development. I think like web development, to be very honest, is like maybe the most boring thing you could do, in my opinion. I spent more time doing. I really liked the more engineering embedded systems part.
Right.
So I
Okay.
spent a bit of time on Arduino. I started working with my friend on
Very
a
interesting.
drone umbrella. It's an umbrella that has a drone under it and it follows you.
Right.
So that was how I got started with ROS, Robot Operating
Okay.
System. So I got interested in that, and then of course embedded because working with the rover, it's all C++ or Python, I guess,
Right.
right?
Right.
So those I think always trying new things, trying to see what else could you do other than the thing that you're doing right now. I think is also really helpful.
But from what you're saying so far, it seems like you're talking a lot about, finding opportunities in your environment and then pursuing them, right? Even if, for example, as you said, your school only had like one class for programming or something of the sort. So, as you said, right, like you essentially got started with like more meaty programming in 11th grade. And you're emphasizing that, it doesn't really, I mean, you don't have to be coding from five to like make it as a programmer,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah.
So what do you think is the sort of best way for like some young ambitious people these days to get into any of these spaces, whilst, like you said, avoiding GPT and focusing on just building those fundamentals?
I think that programming, again, like it's impossible to ignore GPT. But I think
Absolutely.
from a like top down perspective, I think the best way I can explain is like programming is not the code. It's not just the code. It's not going to be the code in the future, right? Maybe back then it was like a lot of like applying the principles to the code. But now it's like, at the end of the day, models, once you give them what you want them to do, they can do it, right? But I
Right.
think from a more, like a larger perspective, it's like figuring out how to start from a big project and getting down to the like to step by step. That is what models still struggle on. And like you can think of it like models have, thinking tokens, they have these processes now, right? But you still don't see like full companies being built by just a single model, by just the like thinking tokens, right? And the thing about like I'd say like I want to like use the analogy of like just like problem solving in general, right? Because like if you look at like programming, fundamentally it's just like, okay, I want to build something, right? And then from building that thing, what do you have to figure out? You might want to figure out, what technologies to use, how you want to like structure a project, how your parts of the project talk to each other, right? On web development, it's pretty simple. There are standardized ways to structure a project. There's like file systems, whatever, right? But like I guess, fundamental aspect of taking that idea and turning it into something that you can actually make,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That skill is something that you should develop. Like it like aside from
Right.
anything else coding, it's you have to develop that skill, because if you can figure that out, now I'm like, okay, I'll pose you another question, right? One of the projects that
Right.
we're doing is like the drone umbrella, right? The premise was like, okay, drone umbrella, okay,
Right.
all the hardware was done. All of it was just like my friend could like control with his, the
Right.
joystick thing, the controller, right? And they could
Right.
fly somewhere. The question is like, how do you do that with code now? Like, what can you do,
Okay.
right? So immediately we're like, okay, what are some ideas we could do? You could like, you can like emulate the signal coming out of the controller, and you can see if you
Right.
can like remap that, right, with software, with like radio or something like that. Another idea is like look into what libraries this thing supports. Can I work with like, can I put a Raspberry on it, connect it, and then like run ROS on it? Okay, sure, I can do that. Okay, now can I do it with C++ or Python? I'm betting with Python, so I'll do it with Python. Yeah, at that point, it's like, okay, how do I want to structure? How do I want to get data in, right? How do I figure out where the person is, right? So we came up with a bunch of ideas. We're like, okay, we can use radar, we can use a time of flight camera, which is basically just like sonar. It just bounces light signals back and forth and creates the thing, right? Another thing you could do is like you use AI. You could like use a depth. You can take an image and create a depth map, right? All those things are possible ideas, right?
Right.
And I think the skill of taking the question of what you want to make and then converting it into like the possible things you could do, and then
Right.
like from that figuring out what is the best feasible solution, that's a skill that you really want to get good at, right? I'm not the best at it, obviously. There's a billion other solutions. I'm not an engineer, right? But like being able to figure out possible solutions, that's something that I think like aside from anything, right, you really should learn how to do. And so if you're a programmer that's like just starting out, right, I think starting from, okay, what do I want to make? Like that's a very fundamental question, because like there's a
Hmm.
billion things you can make, right? And some of them will like you'll like more than others. Some of them will be harder than others. But finding something that's just a balance of like, I like what I'm building. I think like I just like things that are funny. I
Hmm.
like what I'm building. I think it's feasible. I think I can learn things from it, right? And
Right.
now you have an idea. Okay, I have an idea. What do I do for them, right? And then it's like, okay, from that, what do I need to figure out? What technologies am I using? What path am I following, right? And all of that, again, you don't need GPT for it, right? You can just use
Right.
Google search. You probably figured that out. Again, if you use GPT, sure, go ahead. You can give it this problem. But like, again, the more things you give it to do for you, the less critical thinking you do, right? And I
Absolutely.
think that's the
Absolutely.
most key thing I can say is like, in this day and age with generative search, I'm writing a paper right now on generative search, actually. Like,
Wow.
the more there is with generative search or generative AI, like, I'll give you an example, right? Google, for the longest time, right, you'd give it keywords, and then it would come back and it would like give you a bunch of links, right? There's page rank, long algorithm, whatever. It would give you a bunch of links, and it's on you to go through each of these links and figure out what you want to do, right? If you look through Google's recent blogs on generative AI, they've changed that. It's no longer Google helps you find what you want. It is Google answers your questions for you. That's a very different thing to do. And I'm like, okay, sure, you can do that. And maybe like it increases shareholder value. I don't fucking care. But like, if that happens, what happens to literally anyone who's trying to do research? If you think about it, right? Now Google's giving you the answers, right? And again, back to the programming thing. If I want to build a drone umbrella, I can just say how to build a drone umbrella. And Google will give you the answers. So what does that mean? Like, there are a billion other ways you can do it, right? And you're not making the decision anymore. You're letting Google do the decision making for you. You're letting ChatGPT do the decision, right? Like, you're not developing that like muscle in your brain. It's not
100%.
You're not developing that thing in your brain that like enables you to like make critical decisions, do the research, right? And I think those are going to be the fundamental skills moving on, regardless if you're like trying to do startups, if you're trying to get into like quants or something like that.
Right.
All these like. Any interview, any job, any whatever you're gonna do requires critical thinking, and it's not even about like programming or anything. That can like AI can do that eventually. I don't even care, but like the whole process together and putting everything together that requires critical thinking. And I think like aside from everything, you should learn that. And if you can do that. In the context of programming, I think like in the context also really helps. It's like there are many ways to learn critical thinking. But if you're like doing some sort of like project that you're coming up with and you're like developing that like critical thinking muscle as you're programming, then like in similar problems, if you're like no longer doing web development, you're doing mobile dev, right? Those sort of things, those sort of questions that come up will be slightly the same, right? Even if you move on to game dev or you do application dev or backend or embedded, like all these things, they're going to be very similar questions, right? That all just require you to like just think critically about how do you do things, do the same sort of research and that sort of thing. And so I think like those are all things, again, that do not require a degree, okay? Anyone can do that, right? But if you can figure that out, right, then you can match any other programmer in the world. Like everyone's operating on the same principles at this point, right? Programming's gotten so democratized that it's literally just like
100%.
Either figure it out on your own or spend $20 on Cursor or whatever. I don't even know.
Right.
But like it's really just like if you can figure it out on your own, and I trust that anyone can, right? You can get anywhere. I fundamentally think it's that. Okay.
I mean, there's a couple of things that you're saying here that I really resonate with, right? What you're saying to find sort of ideas in the environment around you and then sort of pursue programming as a tool to build those out rather than like explicitly learning programming for the sake of learning it, right? I really like sort of see what you're saying about the whole AI hampering our critical thinking because I've seen it happen to myself. I've seen it happen to like peers where they're just endlessly using ChatGPT and it's really I think hindering their ability to innovate.
I'm just gonna throw some points out. Okay,
Sure.
When I was in Vancouver, it's like when I was grade 7, grade 8, I wanted to pick a school. Okay, and we had these things called mini schools. They're sort of like a small cohort of students that like go on and try to like learn specifically either STEM or Spanish or whatever. And at the time, I was a very STEM person. Like me and Alex, we were both like I think the science and math kids that are elementary schools, right? So I was like, okay, I want to go into the science one, but my parents overrode that decision. They're like, okay, you're gonna go into the humanities one. I was like, why, right? And now I'm like, that is the decision that literally like defined me for the foreseeable. I will explain. There's so much goodness in that decision. Okay, reasoning is that they realized that I was gonna try to learn on my own. I think like the big thing for kids these days is like the internet is there. You have as much time as you want. You can spend it. You can allocate your time to Instagram Reels or whatever, or YouTube or something. But if you can allocate your time to learning, right, you will get such a head start. And at the time, I sort of realized that I was like probably gonna learn programming or learn STEM on my own, right? But instead, my parents put me in a program to try to develop my humanities skills. So I was like, English or social studies. I was like, why am I learning this, right?
Right.
And I think for a lot of kids, it's like, why does this matter, right? Why does this why do I need to learn history? It doesn't help me when I want to do programming, right?
Right.
But I think the big thing about learning, I think, is that it doesn't matter, in my opinion at least, it doesn't matter if you're doing, like, if you're already specialized or something. Everyone that I know here at Stanford or beyond, or everyone that I know that is even specialized in any degree or whatever, still tries their best to learn other things. I think there's no point in saying, okay, just because I've made up my mind I'm going to do programming, does it mean that you should leave out the learning on other things, right? Sorry. So then, as I went through high school, obviously, I tried learning a bunch of things. I took law classes, I took like modern history, global history. I started getting into video production, so I tried making documentaries. And at the time, I also started learning Japanese, right? Again, like if I look at the things that I sort of tried to learn, it's all over the place. Like science to history to law to Japanese to programming. It's like I cannot pin down exactly what this guy does, right? But I think that the key thing is that all of these things, right, in this sort of liberal education, all of these things will come together. And it doesn't have to be something that is immediately clear how it comes together, right? But it could be as simple as, I learned programming. I'm going to Japan this summer. The hope is to talk to Japanese developers, is to develop that sort of connection, right? It's something that I did not even anticipate that I was going to have as a skill, but just way back I invested in learning this. And then now I have the opportunity to try it out, right? Other things like, history and like social studies and stuff, like you might not know where those connections come from, right? But they're made in your brain, right? And the things that you'll know just from the facts that you are learning something different from the things that you're traditionally learning, those connections will build up in your brain, and eventually you're just going to find some use for it, okay? Like you're always going to find some way that it's useful for you. And I think that it's a sort of a sad thing that a lot of people are like deciding way early that they're only going to focus on one thing because their brain is going to be like focused too much on like one specific path in their life, right? There's not as much adaptability, and I think like looking at the landscape of tech these days, adaptability is so important, right? You can't just be good at one thing, right? You have to have other things to back that up, right? And so the other lesson I wanted to think is like when I was going through high school, right? Obviously there were classes that I was like, okay, I'm probably not like I don't want to like get good at. I don't want to take AP statistics. I don't think I'm going to use statistics. It's like I remember that class. I was like barely showing up. I had so many absences in that class, right? But again, it's like how much you put into it is how much you get out of it. I think everyone says that, right? Like, and people just throw it off as cliche. But like in my mind at the time, I was like, genuinely, why am I going to use statistics, right? And I come out here, AI comes out. AI is what? AI is math, right? Of course you need statistics. So now I'm like, okay, now I have to learn back my statistics. And I realize, okay, all this time learning standard deviation, normalization, all that, this is literally the math that I'm applying in my class, and that's why I'm failing this class, right? You can choose to allocate your time, and I think even now, looking back on it, it's like, maybe it's at that time, I just didn't have time for that specific class. But on the other hand, I really wanted to get good at these things, so I just allocated my time to like spend more time in learning this, spend less time in learning this. That was a sacrifice I made, right? But being conscious of how you learn and being conscious that like you only have this much time in your life, and I want to allocate this much time into this and this much time into this, and recognizing that certain things have benefits and certain things have drawbacks, and eventually you're going to have to figure out how to figure out your life that way, right? And so obviously that sacrifice means that now I have to catch up on all my statistics stuff, right? All the stuff that I missed out on. On the other hand, I spend more time on math, and so like now I've gotten slightly ahead in terms of math in the American system, right? So all these things, it's like it's really a balance. You really have to figure out like what you really want to learn, what you maybe don't want to learn right now, but recognizing where your level's at in everything that you're trying to do, right? I think that like being conscious of how you learn is like how you figure out your life there. Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. So I mean, I know like a lot of people these days, they like disparage the traditional education system for not giving young people enough opportunities to like explore whatever it is that they're interested in. But as you said, right, programming is so democratized nowadays that it's literally just a tool to get to, wherever you want to go. And I think it's so important, as you said, to get exposure to all of these like interdisciplinary fields, be it social studies, be it English, be it whatnot. And I think that is really one sort of meritorious thing that, the traditional education system today has to offer. And so, I mean, of course, it has a plethora of drawbacks as well. But yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. And I'm really happy that you included that.
Yeah, obvious. I mean, like, okay, I'll say this with a grain of salt. Like, again, I had 160 absences in high school. Okay? I'm not going to say I'm a model student, okay? But again, I think, like, my takeaway from my high school experience is that in high school, you have time. In university, I could barely, like, of course, this sort of, this interview I had with Aaryaman, this interview I've been looking forward for the entire week, right? But again, it's like, for the rest of the week, right? I had like struggles to find time to do anything that I want to do. And in choosing to do certain things, I like sacrifice, like I like there's a piece of that's like 2 days late at this point, but I don't care. In high school, you have so much more time. Like it's unbelievable how much more time you have in comparison. Like maybe like Stanford just like is much more busy and whatever, right?
Right.
But like in high school, you have the freedom to make decisions, to spend your time on things. That is something you genuinely will miss once you're in university, because once you're on a certain path, once you're like, if you've declared a major or something, you really have to do that major, right? It really restricts you. And so in high school, it's like you really should take your time and like try things. I'm really glad that like my parents got me into like a bunch of other things beyond programming, right? They got me into music, into badminton, soccer, like swimming, all these things. Some things I really sucked at. Some things I like to this day. I've been playing piano now for I think like 13 years or something like that. And like all these things, right, are just like they just gave me this opportunity. And at the time I was like, why am I playing piano? Now it's like one of the most treasured skills I've had, right? And they just come back, right? Just all I'm gonna say is like, please try things in high school. Anytime beyond, like really, really try things, because like if you can have any leg up on anyone else, on whatever, on your profile, as a character in your mind, the way you think, any of these things will give you an advantage. And high school is really the best time you can have to like try these things, right?
Oh, beautiful.
Okay.
So, okay, I mean, since you touched upon, college and like its rigor, I think I'll just directly jump to this section. So, what was it like when you got into Stanford? What were your, thoughts and feelings?
Well, a funny story is when they give out the admissions,
Right.
it's Ivy Day. So Ivy Day
Yeah.
is when all of them come out, right?
Right.
And at that point, I think I applied to Stanford early, so early action.
Okay.
And at that time, I got deferred, which is already rare. I think like only a couple percent
Yeah,
of people
yeah.
get deferred. So I was like happy, but I was also like, I remember when I got my deferred notice, like my head shot back and I got a concussion or something. It was like I was so sad. Anyways, so from there, I was so depressed from Ivy Day, because like I didn't get into a single school. I think like I got into UCLA, and I got rejected from like Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, Yale.
Right.
Around like Berkeley. I got rejected from Berkeley. It was like, right? And so like I really was not expecting to get into Stanford, right? So and then I got into Stanford, and it was sort of like I was happy, obviously, but like my parents were just like, okay, Stanford is like $100,000 a year, right? It's a lot of money, and you're an international student. You don't have money, okay? You don't get any sort of scholarship grants or anything, right? And so I was really weighing the comparisons between Stanford and
Right.
between Waterloo, which was the other option that I got. And I know a lot of people think like, okay, Waterloo's actually, again, it is a really, really good option for programmers,
for
right?
sure.
And so I was like, okay, Waterloo Computer Science versus Stanford, which one do I choose? That was sort of my mentality for a long time. But I think personally, I was pretty set on doing Stanford, mainly because I think like on this school specifically, it is one of the only places where you get such an interdisciplinary mix of people, and one where it is celebrated if you are interdisciplinary. Like, I know one of my friends, like, I think on the first couple of weeks, I like asked every friend I could, like, can you tell me a bit about your story, right? Like, how'd you get into
Right.
Stanford? More so on like what you maybe like write about your application letter, right? One of my friends, for example, he's from Japan. He plays violin. He's one of the best violinists in Japan. He also does physics. He wrote a paper, like published, about the physics of the violin string, right? As it relates to, I believe, like he found connections of how it vibrates with a similar equation to how the heart vibrates. It was very interesting. He also simultaneously learned English by reading those papers. He read like research papers, and that's how he learned English, right? He didn't go into international school or anything. He literally like spent his time just reading papers, talking to English people, like English speaking people. That's how he learned English, right? Like you can tell this guy knows this stuff, and like you can look at him and he's like, everyone's normal, but once you get them talking, he's amazing at violin. He's amazing at physics. He's amazing at like so many different things. You can talk about them all at the same time, right?
All right.
That's just one of those kids, right? Like, so other friends I've met, all of them have sort of, like, they have something that they're obviously interested in, right? But everyone can have conversations about everything, and anyone can have anyone can like sort of spark questions about anyone else's topic. So like I love talking to my international relations friends, especially now given
Right.
the United States is
Yeah.
empire or whatever, right? But I love to just throw at them and it's like, what do you think of whatever policies these days? As a Canadian, I just love laughing at them, and then they just like talk about it, right? And I just like throw questions, right? It's like good fun, but also like that's again talking about the interdisciplinary aspect of
Right.
of like learning and stuff, right? You can't just be good at programming, right? If you want to build connections with people, right, which is another big thing I was worried I wouldn't make connections in Silicon Valley as sort of an international student not doing programming a lot. I found that like the best way of making connections is not by talking about programming. Like you will not make friends talking about programming. You will make friends by talking about other things, okay? Things
Right.
just in life, about things you can relate to, right? And those require social skills, those require knowledge about and context about the world, right? So you really like those are the skills that you should develop alongside programming, obviously, right? And those are the skills that really helped me here with making connections. And I will not understate how powerful connections are in Stanford, in Silicon Valley, whatever. I think that it is a terrible idea to come here and say, okay, my goal is to make connections. I think there are people who do that. I think like those people still go on to do things, but I think that it takes the joy out of what it means to have a connection. And I think it's like these connections, to me, I don't look at very many people in my life and say, okay, they're just a connection, right? Or
Right.
they're a LinkedIn follow request. Okay?
Right.
There's no point in saying, okay, someone's like that, right? The whole point is like a friendship, right? There are people that I can talk to just about normal stuff, right? And then somewhere along the line, those things will help me. As a
Right.
good example, I was talking to a friend working on the rovers, right? And then just as he was like, oh, do you want to talk to my friend? He works for a robotics company here, right? He makes really cool stuff. I think you should meet him, right? One of my friends, Jack, he's amazing, right? But like those are just connections we made at working on the rover project, right? And then he was just like, do you want to meet this guy, right? Simultaneously, I meet other friends just like in dinners, right? Like I just joined the Hong Kong Student Association, and I was because like, I speak Cantonese, right? But I was there mostly just like see what the vibe is, right? Got to know some really amazing friends, right? And from there, I'm like, oh, I have one friend who's interested in quantum physics. I know another friend who's like really good at quantum physics. Maybe I can like get them to talk to each other, that sort of thing, right? It's not like, oh, I connect them or anything, right? It's like, oh,
Right.
these guys would have really constructive
Right.
conversations with each other, right? And I
Right.
think that's really the vibe that I'm getting. Is like good connections come from, oh, these guys would really hit it off well, right? And in general, right, like there's no worry about saying, oh, today I really want to meet 3 people like a week or something like that, right? I think that's a really toxic mentality to have. I think like
Wow.
you make the best friends just literally, but just by talking about things that are interesting, and then like you just like make those connections naturally, and those natural
Right.
connections are the ones that stay, right?
Right.
And to go back again, the friend that I know that came here and say, okay, I'm gonna make 1,000 connections, that's my goal. I can ask them, do you know this guy? And you'll be like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I've met him, like, talked over 5 minutes or something, right? Then I'm like, do you really know him? Like, would you say
Right.
you're friends with him, right?
Right.
That's the thing. Is like, they're not the closest friends, right? Obviously, again, they do have close friends, but those are not the ones that they're like, okay, I want this guy as a connection, right? I don't think I've ever had anyone that I was like, oh, I want this guy as a connection, and I can now say confidently that we're, like, best friends or anything. I don't think that ever works, right? So yeah, and then obviously, like, I think there's going to be a mass of people watching this that are, not in Silicon Valley. And, like, I think the biggest thing for me, like, when I was in Canada, I was like, okay, what do I do? Like, how do I build connections, right? I
Right.
know some of the best people that are just on the internet. Like, literally, like, for example, Build a Group, obviously. I joined the Railway Discord server. I think
yeah.
I found out Railway maybe from Build a Group. I don't even know. Maybe it was some Alex or something. But I joined the
Possibly,
Railway
yeah.
Discord. I joined the Railway Discord server, yeah. And they had some of the most amazing programmers that I know.
Right.
They literally if you join now, right? They're maybe gonna be like the support engineers, whatever. They're gonna be
Right.
active in the chat, but again, the chat is active. You can join in and say hi. People
Right.
are friendly, right? I think programmers fundamentally want to make friends, right? So those are some of the best ways that people get to know their environments, get to know what programming is like. Not only that, there are even friends that I know learned English through the Discord chats. They literally just sit there and
Wow.
observe, and then I try to step in at some point, send some messages, right? They learned English, right? Just by participating, right? So I really say it's okay, you don't have to be in the valley, right? And the
Right.
same rules for connections apply. I'm not gonna be like, oh, I want to be friends with the server like the server leader or the CEO of Railway by like
Right.
shooting him a message of like, hey, do you like programming? Like that's a terrible
Yeah.
way to connect connections, right? Like
Yeah.
the real connections are like if you just happen to find hey, both of us are from like British Columbia or something like that, right?
Right.
Or like you just talk about things, or maybe I have like a server problem and then I need a request and like things go on, right? Like being natural like that. I think there's really no benefit to like trying to force down friend requests or trying to like force
Absolutely.
friendships and stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you really can make friends, like, or you really can make connections online in any capacity, no matter where you are on
Right.
the internet, right? And so, yeah, and simultaneously, there's another thing actually. I'll shout at them. I'll shout them out. You probably know Hack Club. Hack
Yeah,
Club
yeah,
was, yeah, Hack Club was very instrumental to like me meeting a lot more programmers near like grade 12. I think I joined some other hackathons. I was one of the first to bring Hack Club to Vancouver. I think there were several other people that did. And from now, one of my best friends, I'll shout him out, Kevin. Kevin is amazing. He now runs the British Columbia Youth Developer. It's a C. It's like I don't know, conference, something like that. He does amazing stuff. He maybe got like 300 people interested in programming in like 1.5 years. Okay, and like from there, like everyone now like spawns hack clubs, like what are they called? It's like he spawns so many groups interested in programming at all these like different high schools, right? Just through like connecting online. Like I talked to him, I invited him out to like San Francisco. I met some friends, he met some friends.
Right.
He got inspired to start that. And then on his own, maybe like just meeting a couple of other people, he started this group. It grew to like 300 other people. And now he leads this, right? Now he leads one of the largest groups of programmers in the province. He now runs hackathons. He now works for Hack Club, organizes a bunch of stuff.
Right.
This isn't maybe in a span of like 2 years or something like that. And now I think he does research with like the University of Toronto. He now works at like a robotic company here in San Fran, actually.
Wow.
Again, like he like all these sort of things, right? Like when I was talking to him, like he genuinely had an interest in programming, right? But like he lives again in British Columbia. Like that's not Silicon Valley. It's nothing close to Silicon Valley, but you can still find programmers, right? Hack Club is a good way to find programmers. They have a lot of good like ways to like connect with other people, right?
Right.
But yeah, there's never a shortage of like people interested in programming that are interested in making friends. Like it's always there.
I love it. Yeah, this is something I see a lot with a lot of young people, and I think it's a trait that's acquired over time, if at all. But yeah, I mean, try not to manufacture, relationships and friendships, and I think that's the most sustainable strategy in the long term. I love it. Um, so okay, so I mean, you're saying all this amazing stuff about, meeting people at college and working on all these really cool projects. So what was the reason that you wanted to go to college in the first place? Did you know about, any of this stuff beforehand, or what like really inspired you to want to apply rather than just going out into, I mean, even just flying Tesla, for example, and joining a startup or building your own thing?
I mean, okay. I mean, there's a bunch of ways. I think like I'm still figuring out if I want to stay in college. I think Stanford's
Right.
very lucky because I can take, I think up to like 6 gap quarters or something. I can like
Wow.
I can just gap right now, and I can take a quarter off. I can come back and take another quarter off, and so on. Right? And I can find a startup in between if I want to work there. Right? But I think fundamentally, and this is something about Stanford. I think that at least I can confirm. I can't confirm for every university, obviously, right? But this space has some of the most inspired people I've ever met. Right? There's always people interested in things. And I think that for me, that was one of the reasons I came to Stanford, right? I think every college has their own reasons why you might go. Waterloo obviously has some of the most cracked people. If you want to meet people who are at the top of their game, or if you want to get better at your craft, right? One of the best places, right? If you want to get work experience, Waterloo's amazing, right? Literally like a state school, right? If you just want to get a degree and get out, that's one way you can do it. If you think you can make it in a startup, you can go there and make it out, right? And figure it out. I think that for me personally, it was just like I was sort of always looking for other people who are inspired to do things, right? Not even necessarily programming. I was just interested in people who wanted to try different things, right? Who wanted to do other majors that weren't computer science, and then they wanted to find people who were in computer science, right? And we hit it off, right? I think I think coming here to Stanford, that's one thing that I was just I want to look for those sort of people that are still aspiring to do things. those people inspire me, and I hope I can like teach them a bit of programming, maybe, right?
Right.
That's the sort of thing. That's why I wanted to come here. Of course, a lot of people are like, okay, but I want to make money, right? I
Right.
think that, and this is maybe me coming from this privileged position again. Like, I'm lucky that I'm here, right? I do think that like thinking about money as a goal is not the best way. I think that, like, for example, working at a startup, obviously you make money, right? But if you're like, picture this, right? If you're good at program, if you like already proven yourself building your projects, doing like web development or something like that, and then an offer comes to work at a web development startup, would you take it, right? I think a lot of people are like, maybe, like, it'll make me money, right? Those are the motives you should think about. You shouldn't just think about, oh, I'm doing this thing because it's the obvious thing. I've got offered
Right.
a job, I should take the job, right? You
Right.
should really think about, what am I here to gain?
Right.
Obviously, money is a big concern depending on how financially constrained you are, right? But obviously, the other thing is like, if you're good at this, right, there's always opportunities for you to find things that are adjacent to the things you're good at, but allow you to explore other things. For example, the robotics company that I was working, like that gave me the offer, they're like, okay, we know that you've worked in web developments. We are working on scaling like ingestion systems. So they have like terabytes of video coming in. We need to ingest all that data, right? Your stuff is sort of adjacent to it, right? And so that's how that got that consideration. It was that like they saw that I was interested in doing something, and they saw that I'd proven myself that I would learn on my own, and they also saw that I had at least the base skills, right? And on my end, it's like, okay, sure, money is a thing, but this is not just web development. This is not something that I've already honed my skill at. This is something that I can do and also learn a lot from, right? And so I think that that's the big thing, is like, for anyone making any sort of decision, is like, think about what you could possibly gain from it, regardless of money or skills or learning or meeting new people or like going beyond that job and finding a new job, right? All these things just take into account. I think like when I landed at like, going to college, it was that I saw maybe obviously I would lose money from this, right? It's net loss there. But I've met maybe, I think this year, 200 to 300 new people that I could actually confidently call like friends. Like I could actually talk to them about stuff, right? Classes do that to you, right? You just meet these people, right? Simultaneously, it's like you get these clubs, you get to go on amazing opportunities. Like, the Rover project takes us to, Yosemite, hopefully to Alaska, Antarctica. Like these sort of projects, right? Those are also opportunities to consider, right? And so if you're like, okay, should I go to college? Should I not? Think about, like, obviously apply to all of them, right? If you can.
Right.
But when you're given the offer, if you're considering, okay, should I just go to a startup? Should I go to university? Always consider that, like, if you're like 17 or 18, I'm 18, I just turned 18, okay?
Right.
Like, we're still young, right? It doesn't matter if you join a startup at 18 or if you like go to university for 2 years and then you're like 20, right? Like fundamentally, like, I look 14, okay? Like, it does not matter, okay? You might, like, you can, whatever, like, on at face value, looking at yourself, it really is how you present yourself. It does not matter if you're just like, if you spend 4 years at this place. If you feel like you've spent a year here at university and you feel like, oh, this isn't working for me, that's where you consider things, right? But I really think, like, before you make that decision, again, if you're really young, you should think about what opportunities you have and really critically consider, like, what am I here to gain if I take this path, right? Is it just the degree? Is it where I'm at? If I'm living in Canada versus the US, do I need a degree, right? Is that what I'm really after, right? So I think that's it. Yeah.
Love it. Okay, I mean, so I think naturally now would be a good time to move into sort of Silicon Valley, right? So as someone that's from Vancouver, what were your expectations of Silicon Valley, and then what's the actual reality that you face there today?
I mean, have you watched Silicon Valley, like the show?
I'm literally watching it right now. I'm on like the last season.
Okay. I haven't watched the whole entire thing, but I watched some episodes, I think.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and I came here, and I've watched other episodes, and I was like,
All right.
the vibe really is like that. I think you have a lot of people who act like they want to be in the show. I'll say that. Maybe it's a controversial take, but it's like a lot of people want to live their lives as if they're living in that state. And that means that living in a life that is honestly, like, bad conditions if they choose to, right? Some people purposely, deprive themselves of sleep because they feel like that makes them work better. There's other situations where you see people like go out to dinners a lot, right? I see other situations where people, raise a bunch of money, maybe go to YC, get all this money, and then suddenly their life changes where, they're door dashing every day, they're going into like Nobu or something there is that aspect too. There is a lot of variety in Silicon Valley, right? And I think it also varies depending on what you're trying to do. For example, I have a friend who is in the biotech space, and I think if he were to raise like a couple million or something like that, like a majority of that would go into, dealing with the FDA or something like that, right?
Right.
It depends what you're trying to do. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, tech is cheap, and so even if you do raise money, right, you aren't really gonna spend all that time on infrastructure, all that money on infrastructure. Maybe you're gonna spend some, right? But I see a lot of tech people go into the space, raise a bunch of money, and then spend all that money on food or something like that, right?
Right.
And so there are a bunch of people who think that they're above everyone else because they've raised a bunch of money. In my opinion, it's not about if you raise money. And this is in my opinion. It's if I'm doing a startup, really should be because I want to improve something with this world. I should do something with it. And so if I come back and I've just made $500,000 from YC, right? That is a net zero on the amounts of people I've helped. Okay.
Right.
Until you actually get clients, until you get the product to the clients and the clients use them, they're happy and they've improved their life.
Right.
Until you've built this whole pipeline, right?
Right.
There's no point in celebrating you've won the lottery or thing, right? You really haven't, right? I think there's also a lot of people who sort of see startups as an escape. I think a lot of people look at big tech these days and they're it's not as reliable anymore, it's not as fun, and they see startups as the new thing, right? The thing that it's still considered the new thing, which is really funny, right? Even though it's been here for so long. I think that the sort of consideration of there are really cracked developers. There are people who dedicate their whole lives to just programming, nothing else. Yeah, there are those sort of people, right? It depends what you want to do. I think those people are, of course, admirable, that they've already made their decisions clear that they're just going to do programming. And yeah, of course, those are sort of people that you might be working alongside in a startup, right? And simultaneously, it's you don't have to go down that path, right? You don't have to be a VC. You don't have to start a startup, right? There are other options to having impact in startup, right? You could literally just bootstrap yourself and get somewhere, right? You don't have to raise money. You could do a nonprofit if you think a nonprofit is a better way, right? You could do research. A lot of really smart people I know are in research right now. Those people eventually get poached and go to DeepMind or something, right? But other people they dedicate their lives to these things, right? I think all of these have their merit, and it really depends on what sort of person you are and if you want to figure that out. And as for Silicon Valley for me, I still haven't figured out for myself. I don't know. Maybe I'll just go into building, making documentaries or something, and completely leave computers. I haven't decided yet. But all of these things, having some sort of passion. If you have some sort of passion, you'll make it in Silicon Valley. I think that's the idea of it, right? Yeah. So that's I don't know, Silicon Valley in a nutshell. Go watch the show, I guess. Really, really, really interesting show. Yeah.
So, okay, being in this sort of environment, right? How do you think that, for example, if you were back in Vancouver, let's create a hypothetical here. Let's say you never, touch wood, let's say you never got into Stanford, right? How would things be different if you were sort of continuing what you're doing right now in Vancouver, versus, continuing it in Silicon Valley? And how does the support from just being in that kind of environment with all of these fast-paced, incredible startups, help you?
That's a really interesting question. I think that before I got into Stanford, and this is something pretty unfortunate for me, I didn't have a very large self-esteem. I'm gonna be honest. Alex knows what I mean. But he's worked with me so many times where I'm literally just the most unconfident person you'll ever meet, right? Because I was I felt that I was literally just doing nothing. Right, I spent all my time learning the skill of how to build websites, and at the end of the day, I was what does that mean? What does it mean to just know this? It feels like nothing, right? And then for some reason, it was once I got to Stanford, something changed, and I don't like that. I really don't like that, especially how other people treat you. Other people suddenly think wow, you're in Stanford or something like that, as if it means something, right? I'm the same person after my application was sent out. I'm the same person before I got in and after, and yet people treat you differently, right? But I think for me, it was once I got in, sort of, I had a bit of mentality shift in that I realized that confidence is really like how you like exude, how you treat yourself, right? And I remember I was so unconfident. I like if you watch my old YouTube videos, I remember those takes. I maybe had 20 recordings to take, because I was like I would read off a script and literally reading the lines, I would stumble on my words, right? That's how bad it was. And like to this day, I'm like talking for an hour at this point, right? Like this is so rambly, but I don't care.
No, I love it.
But I think like there really is that sort of transformation that I really I like I look back on it, I was kind of sad.
Right.
And the other thing was like back then, the way I was working in the startup, I was the founding engineer, like along with my other friends, was founding engineer, right? And as we were working on this, sort of as a programmer, you're not in the action, right? You're not like pitching to people, you're not selling to people, right? And so in that sort of sense, you feel like you haven't contributed as much. You feel like it's like at the same time you're working crazy hours. You're doing so much stuff to build these things, right? But a lot of the time it's like, and this is, you know, not just me. I've heard a lot of people go into situations where they go in as an engineer and they get thrown just crazy shit to do. They have no idea how to do it and they have to figure it out on their own. And then at the end of the day, it's like, you know, the CEO, CTO claims all the credit, right? That sort of thing, right? And like, all of us, like I've talked to several other developers that were in companies in these situations, right? And I think like you really have to realize like it's one thing, you know, obviously like in startups, in companies, not just startups, it's like companies in general, where like a lot of the times it feels like you as an engineer, your worth is you're like not worth anything, right? And like for me, you know, a bit of I guess a shock to me was when I got into like university, like a lot of that was in credit to the skills that I've learned as a developer, right? A lot of the stuff as I was learning in the startup, that helps me get into Stanford, right? But like looking back on it, I really cannot make that correlation that was the like, I cannot make the correlation that like being in Stanford changed anything. I really don't think so. I really think it is how much you learn. And I've heard people, like I've heard very specific like sentiments from, you know, business people they consider leaders as something, saying like programmers are worthless. Eventually, I can just replace you. I can get another programmer, right?
Right.
It's such a common narrative. So many people say stuff like that, right? And a lot of the times, programmers feel like, you know, they're belittled, as if like their work is worthless, as if they're replaceable, right? I think in some ways, there's two ways you have to think about this, right? Number one is like, are you actually replaceable? It's like in my mind, like at the time, I was trying to fight as much as I could to prove what I could do. Like in whatever company I was trying to work with, in whatever project I was trying to work with, right? Because fundamentally, yeah, maybe eventually programming is really worthless, right? But again, you are more than just the code that you write, right? You are like you are the package, right? I remember when I was like working at the startup, I wasn't just coding, right? Like I spent a bunch more time interviewing teachers, doing that sort of research, compiling like you know, testimonials from students about what they liked and didn't like about like, you know, the products that they use, right? That's like not programming stuff, right? That is like critical analysis of like the designs of products. That is like interviews. Those are like social stuff, right? And so I tried to make myself useful by doing that, right? That's not just programming, right? One part is like obviously like, are you really replaceable? Can you really fight to show that you're not provable? And the other part is standing up for yourself. I think that a lot of programmers, even and I think like startups is like, you have the most intimate connection with other people. I think in big companies you have less of a connection, but
of course, yeah.
In a startup, especially in the situation that I faced, a lot of the times they're like, you know, programmers are just. I got the message that programmers were just a tool that, like, you know, and you can hire another programmer and it'll be the exact same thing, right? The real challenge is, can you actually drill into your mind that that is not the case? Because for the longest time before I got into Stanford, I was like, people would throw me that message and I was like, yeah, like, yes sir, I'll just work for you or whatever. Like I didn't have that as much of that spark in me. Like I tried, right? Obviously I tried to imagine that I was doing things beyond the programming, but in my mind it was like I hadn't made it clear in my mind that I was more than just the code, right? But having that sort of confidence gain, I think, along with, you know, obviously working with my other programmers and talking to my programmers, that was how we worked together. And that's when the realization hits that, you know, you have to stand for what you know, and you have to really stand for yourself as a programmer. I think that like figuring out yourself And I
Right.
think, again, the university application process really gets you to think about yourself. Like,
Right.
beyond
Yeah.
anything, if I didn't get to any university at all, I think the one thing I learned was myself. I learned what
Yeah.
I was, I learned what I could do, and that sort of thing, right? And once I figured that out, maybe that was the change. Maybe it wasn't even getting into university or anything. It was
Right.
the
It was
fact that
just
I
the
went through the
process.
university
Right.
application. Yeah, it was the process. When I
Yeah.
went through the process, I figured out myself, and I figured out I could stand for myself. I figured out that, beyond just the programming, right?
Right.
I have the social skills that I now have to talk to these people, right? It really is that, in my opinion, right?
No, that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's so. I mean, what you're saying about, self-esteem as a programmer and essentially being a bit more interdisciplinary rather than just being that like one objective coder. I think that's why I love startups so much because when you work in big tech, there's so much bureaucracy. You have like very little autonomy that you are literally just following orders and you are adhering to that sort of conventional mindset of okay, you are replaceable as a programmer. And I think that's what startups and even this like entire university application process is really, really helpful with because it encourages you to, explore ideas outside of just like absolute programming. And I think that's, as you said, I
Yeah,
mean, the
yeah,
most
yeah.
valuable thing you can do.
No, that's it's really valuable. I'm glad. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. One other, I think one other point is like,
Yeah.
if you ever go on like tech Twitter, right? I
Yeah.
think Twitter is, it's a
Toxic.
landscape. It is a landscape. I will say, yeah. Be careful. Like,
Yeah.
I think it is very easy to get into that loop where like, the algorithm feeds you like the best of the best or the worst of the people. And like,
Right.
people say like, you're not gonna make it, or this guy's gonna
Right,
make it,
right.
or like,
Echo
we're back,
chambers.
we're so back. Like, those sort of things are
Right, right,
so
right.
toxic to you because you don't realize what that does to you, like psychologically. Like, you don't, like, in your mind, maybe you're just like, oh yeah, obviously it doesn't apply to you, but you think about it, the fact that you think about it, right? That is just a bit damaging. Simultaneously, I will say that there are some brilliant people on the space, right? There is still stuff to be gained, right? A lot of new technologies come out on Twitter because people talk about it. It really depends on how you like manipulate your own algorithm and get to that certain space, right? And
Right.
obviously it depends on the people you follow and so on, right?
Right.
But you have to be careful. You have to be careful on Twitter. But again, there's always pros and there's always cons. The pros is you can talk to anyone in DMs, you can get to know these people, you can find out the newest stuff, right? The cons obviously is it's run by some man, I'm not gonna name who, but it's like you have to be careful, right? Like you don't know what the algorithm does. Well, the algorithm obviously now is open source, but
Right.
simultaneously you just don't like the algorithm is built to generate clicks, generate impressions, to promote the loudest
Right.
voices, right? Regardless of if there's any internal messaging on it, the fact is the fact, and that the loudest voice, regardless of if it is positive or negative, will get amplified. Okay, so you have to be careful of that.
Absolutely.
And I think, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, since we're on the topic of like people and networking in general, I think now is a good time for us to move into a segment on, networking and
Sure, yeah.
team building and stuff. So, I know you mentioned Alex. So, in addition to him, who were some of the, I mean, including him, I guess, who were some of the significant like individuals through your journey that helped you become who you are today, or like some people that you enjoyed collaborating with?
Ooh.
Maybe we should get them on a builder talk with you next time. That'll be fun.
I think I want you to talk to Alex. Honestly, think
I
he
want to
is-
talk to Alex. Yeah,
He
I
is
mean,
very funny. He is extremely funny. He is He is
Okay.
one of the. He probably made me who I am. Like how much we've
Wow.
talked. I think in conversation. I actually want to check. I'm just gonna check right now. Yeah, our conversation is 70,000 results. So 70,000 messages back and forth. We've been talking for so long, and it's like these sort of connections. Like we've really talked to each other for so long. Again, I think like there's a bunch of people that made me who I am. I think Alex Obvious was one of them. Vincent was very interesting. Vincent was he's now I think working. He's now at Carnegie Mellon. So he's
TMU, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's so busy. He like has a lot of stuff on his plate, but he is
Right.
one of the most brilliant people I know. I think for
Right.
many reasons. The first is that he's very analytical. Like he understands the big picture. He has the technical knowledge to do it, and he will figure out how to do it. And those sort of people are incredible. Like the people that you can trust to build things, I think those people I think really matter. because like those people really are rare. I think like a
Right.
lot of people will accept things to do, and then there's the sort of people who will be able to again take a thing that I want built and then really think about it, like literally question me and be like, are you sure you want something like this? What about this? Okay, what about we approach it from a different direction? Are you sure customers like this sort of thing? What about like beyond startups, beyond literally, like think about like hackathon, for example, right? Hackathons are very interesting because like half the time you're sleep deprived, right? Beyond
Right.
that, right? It's like you really depend on a certain dynamic, right?
Right.
If you have a leader, if you don't have a leader, like those sort of things. But simultaneously, it comes down to can each person pull their
Right.
own weight, right? And
Right.
so, in my opinion, like the greatest quality that I have is the trust that someone can figure out something on their own. Right? The trust that they
Yeah.
can have the critical thinking skills to take an
Right.
idea and like blossom it into something, right? What are some examples? For example, like a long, long time ago, one of the best examples I have of Vincent is like, we're like, okay, on our learning management system, we want Zoom. We want to put Zoom on our sites. Again, stupid idea, does not make any sense anymore. We literally scrapped it, doesn't matter. Vincent pulled it off. We literally gave him a month on it and he figured it out, right? That's just,
Right.
again, this is like pre-GPT. This is literally using just search tools. Today, you might easily land at, okay, I'll just use LiveKit, I'll like GPT some
Right.
stuff, set up a Python
right.
session, API keys, done, right?
Right.
Again, back then, like, he literally learned web development that summer, okay? And then he's building
Wow.
this. Those are the sort of people that really jump out to me.
Right.
Same thing with Alex. I would trust him with my life. I trust him with my life, okay, to review my PRs and always find something wrong, okay? That's what matters because he will, like, those sort of people simultaneously keep you on your feet, right? They keep you from being complacent, from just keep pushing to production, right?
Right.
You always require that second, like, those sort of, like, second looks, those sort of, like, checks to make sure, like, you're sane, right? And, like, I trust those people to also call me out, right? And if I see that they're
Right.
doing something stupid, I'll call them out, right? That sort of mutual trust is so, so important, right? Developing those connections is so important as well, right? It's very rare these days that you see programmers, especially independent programmers, just on their own, collaborating with people with this deep of a connection, right? But I
Right.
really do think that, like, you know, me and Alex are at this point that, like, if we were to go on and try something new, like, I trust that we could figure out something together. Like, it doesn't matter if it's web development or anything. We'll just figure something together because we have that sort of trust, right? And that is the thing that I want to build in the team if I were to build a team. The other thing is the railway how we work docs. Those are so influential. Like, I remember, I think it was like, I found those, I think, again, Alex sent them to me or something like that. And then I like went on Railway Chit Chat and I was like, really, this exists? And they were like, yeah, we have like 2 or 3 documents of just how we work. So inspirational. Like, I would say, like, obviously, not every company is Railway. Not every
Right.
company has that caliber of people working in their expertise. All of them at the top of their league, right? And all of them in which they can trust to do something, right? And it's a bit of a harder problem for them when they have like interns who don't necessarily fit into that company spirit, right? That's why they spend so much time trying to find the right people that fit, right? But the key thing that you can take away from, like, if you read the Railway How We Work documents, is that, like, they trust each person to deal with their own stuff. They also trust each person to share what they want to do. For example, one of the great innovations I saw is that, 1, they don't have very many meetings. 2,
Right.
they have a chat for, like, showing off their stuff. The idea being that if you work on something enough to be proud of it, then you want to share it, right? And so if the whole point of a stand-up meeting is to sync everyone up, then you can also do that asynchronously just by having that sort of chat where everyone shares what they're interested in, right? Again, and like this is sort of what Twitter does anyways. But like this is like the idea is the same, is that you spend all your time doing something, you want some feedback on it, and so it only makes sense that you have something like this to show off your work, right? That's so interesting to me. And again, there are some people that fit into this category of people who can really figuring things out on their own, try to do the best and not just the bare minimum, right? There are people that can do that, right? There are people that can't, right? And the biggest challenge of my life is try to get people that are just doing the bare minimum and figuring out how we can turn those into the people who want to actively share what they do, right? If we can get people to actively share what they do, the quality automatically goes up, right?
Right.
Because no one wants to share something that they think no one else will like, okay? They'll improve on their own, right? They'll build that sort of like, cycle on their own, and then you'll automatically just get better products, right? Simultaneously, having this sort of like asynchronous chat where like everyone like knows that they can just reach out to anyone, everyone owns their own thing, right? Everyone embodies that, and then like if there's a problem, you know who is there to fix it, right? Like having that sort of trust to really like own your own stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing that I took away from that. And so like
Right.
all of that, like I really think is like it's so useful for startups if you think about it. To like run a company, because a lot of startups
Right.
usually have one or two people at the very end. They raise money,
Right.
they go pre-seed, and I know a lot of people who just like raise money, hire like 100 developers, and that's it, right? Simultaneously,
yeah.
there's those people that raise a lot of money and they hire like 3 developers, right? There is that
Right.
change. There's a changing aspect there, right? Maybe you don't need 100 developers. Maybe that's not really
Yeah.
what the goal is, right? If you just have 3 developers, right, that you can trust to, instead of being a +3 to your team, it's a ×3 to your team where everyone like
Yeah.
can discuss, right? That's what really matters to me, right? If I can find people like that, that's really what I'm looking for. Again, like you also have to be like realistic on like what are you doing, right? Like if it's literally a hackathon, like no one cares, right? Like half the hackathons I do are just for fun, right?
Right.
But like those are also still lessons to keep in mind, I think, right? It's not just like saying, okay, I just want to pick the best developer, right? Because like obviously like the best developer is maybe good at programming, but like they have to have other things, social skills. They have to be able to communicate. They have to be able to like shoot you on your own stuff, right? And build to the team rather than building to just what they do, I think.
Right. I mean, that's why startups are so beautiful, right? You get that autonomy, you get that, very diverse expression of opinions, and ultimately that reflects in whatever you're building. So
Yeah, I
it's
think, but
beautiful.
I think that, and I really want to emphasize that, like, the word startup, especially in my mind, has gotten so blurry because, like,
Yeah.
everyone says they're working on a startup, okay? I say
Yeah.
I can work on a startup. Maybe I'm literally just, like, programming nothing, okay? Like, anyone
Right.
can say that, right? I think beyond just saying, okay, I work for a startup, it's like these lessons that you take away from startups, perhaps you should think about how that can apply to the rest of your life, because like again, it's not just startups. You can do nonprofits, you can start your own bootstraps company, you can like open source your stuff and build the community there, right? It's the same principles, right? Building an open source community, it's the same thing, from like how Khan Academy got built and how like
Yeah.
Saul Khan trusted all his video creators, like for example 301 Brown, to own their
Right.
own sections of their website, and then eventually 301 Brown became 301 Brown, right? Like
Right.
those sort of things, like all these lessons do not just apply to
Right.
startups, right? It's like
Right.
you can see them everywhere, right?
Right. So then, how do you think people, I mean, what's the best way to find these kind of people that you can trust so much, the extent that you give them like complete autonomy over, a part of a project, especially as a young person?
It's hard, and this is something that I still haven't figured out. Like, no, I think no one can say that I found the perfect way. I think like if you've seen on like Twitter, like Alexander Wang is the CEO of Scale AI.
Scale it or yeah.
He said that he spends like the majority of his time hiring, right? He spends the
Wow.
majority of his time in calls, talking to people, trying to get at what they actually are, right? And I'm gonna say, like, I probably wouldn't make one of those interviews. Like it's like that sort of thing is super cutthroat, whatever, right? But there's merit in what he's trying to do. He's trying to pick the best of the best of the best of the best, right? He's already in Silicon Valley, looking for the best people from the best schools, and then of those people, trying to figure out which ones can actually do what he wants, right?
Right.
Sorry. And so, like, in finding these sort of people, on my end, right, I tend to not give a lot of technical, like, lead code questions. I don't give any
Right.
lead code questions.
We were discussing this, yeah.
Yeah, like I think like on that end, it's like I tend to want to hear someone out on their thought process. I think this is something that like goes all the way back to the critical thinking thing. I love to more test someone on how they think, how
Yeah.
they try to solve problems, because I think that is the fundamental aspect of programming that I'm like after, right? If you can analyze something critically beyond a programming aspect, but like if I'm given a task, I don't just want like someone to build the thing. I want them to also consider, okay, where does this fit in the scope of the larger project, right? How are users going to use the thing? Am I going to have to consider accessibility. We're going to have to consider like, the globally how the code is like architectured, right? Those are things that are not just like typing in the code or whatever, right? Those are like genuinely like
Right.
critical thinking things, right?
Right.
And I think that, like, again, I'm not an expert in any of these things. Like, I like
Right.
take anything I say with a grain of salt. But like, I think, in general, in meeting people and thinking who could I be friends with, in so on, those are the sort of character traits that I think that I look for, because like those are the people that you'll have the most interesting conversations with. You'll want to build with. You'll want to like be friends with, right? I think that's the very essence of it. Beyond just like, do I want to work with them? It's like, do I want to be friends with them? And those are the friends that I want to be around. So yeah, that's just my opinion. I think everyone has
I love it.
their own way. Yeah.
So, okay, I have a question for
Yeah.
you, in regards to AI, right? So, what are your sort of thoughts on, um, like responsibly using AI in, whatever you're building? Because I remember this is something that we, briefly discussed a while ago on Discord. But you told me that you don't necessarily, criticize your devs for, using AI to solve problems, right? Given that they know what they're doing. So,
Yes.
in your experience, how do you think we should sort of appropriately integrate AI into like these development workflows, like company wide or project wide? And then how do you prevent like the major bugs that come up from, trends like vibe coding or whatever, where like the devs are often blind to what it is that they're building or the code that they're implementing?
I think that it comes down to this. I think you are ready to vibe code a big project when you are when you can explain what every line of code does, right?
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, vibe coding is fine for things that they just want to make. Okay.
Right.
Like I think like there's no harm in vibe coding if you just want to enjoy it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like it's like playing video games. I
Right.
enjoy the process of playing the video game, and so
Right.
I play it, right? Now if you're after like building something with stakes, right? When it comes that like there are users of this thing, right? Or when there's security implications, when there's data implications, when performance is to be managed, right? There are always trade-offs. And I think that in programming, it comes down to like quality. It's usually just a quality, time, and money thing. I think that it's always like this sort of triangle, right? I think for a lot of startups, obviously, like when they start out, it's like they have no money, they have no time, they don't care of quality, so they just like do whatever. And that's what vibe coding is for, right?
Yeah.
I think when it comes to you have stakes, you
Yeah.
don't have very much time, but you have, and even money. I think like even if you don't have very much, if you're like broke or whatever, like, or if you're using Copilot, like Copilot has a education thing, right? Like you can use the Copilot education thing.
Even Cursor now, they just came up with like a free
Oh,
thing for
that's
students.
great. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
yeah.
good, yeah.
You know what's funny? I think Cursor came to Stanford campus and like the CEO asked for like they asked for like any questions. They did an FAQ and they only got one question. It was like, can you give me credits? And like he was so sad by the end because no one came up with actually good questions. Again, I was not there. I just heard from this. Anyways, so he also said something very controversial. He said something like, "It's only $20. You go to Stanford, you probably have 20." I was like, bruh. Okay. Anyway, so fair point, but I think that like when it comes to developing something that has stakes, I think vibe coding gets to a certain point. I think the Primogen did a video on this. It was like it's like the rule. That's what the short was called, and it was something like the first 200 lines are always good, and then once you're past the 200 lines, or once you're past the 2,000 lines, like the y-axis continues to go up until it hits the critical points, right? The critical points is when the y-axis is regrets. And this is when you're like at a certain point where things matter and you're like, oh shit, I vibe coded all of this stuff, right? I think that like at that point you're like, okay, you really have to know what you're doing, right? Like if you're just building this for fun, then no one cares, right? But if you're trying to like vibe code a full company, right? And you're literally just like, you don't spend a single moment looking through what the code does, that's when you have problems. I think up until an MVP, like up until you're at an MVP, does not matter, right? It can just work. If it works, it works, okay? If it doesn't work, then whatever, right? once you're past the point of MVP, once you have trials, once you have users, right? That's when like there are potential security implications, and you have to think about the ethics of this thing. You have to think about who owns the code. Are you really going to take responsibility for the code, right? If you vibe code, you should take responsibility for the code that comes out, right? And so that's why, like, for me, I still, like, majority of the time, I still, like, handwrite most of the stuff, because, like, if something breaks, I take full responsibility because I wrote it, right? Like, and I feel like a lot of people, when they say, like, oh, there's a security implication, all my like users' data is leaked, but I don't take responsibility because I didn't write the code. It was AI. It's all the AI's fault, right? That's not how you just, like, you shouldn't think of things. You can't just like throw responsibility onto like AI and just say, okay, it's the like AI machine's fault or something because like I didn't look at the code, right? You think of it like, you even think of it like, imagine you have like a junior mini engineer working for you, and then like it's your responsibility to like PR, like analyze everything before they merge it in, right? That's sort of how Cursor does it these days. You can just like, most people just like accept all, but you actually should read through what it does, right?
Of course, yeah.
So I think that like once things have stakes, that's when it matters. Before that, it's like whatever. Simultaneously, there's the arguments of what are you programming for? If it's programming for learning, that's a different story. I find that it's like, for example, for my homework, it's so easy to just think, okay, I'm just gonna like turn on Cursor tab and it will easily do my homework for me, right? But that's not the point. By the time Cursor tab finishes, I will still not know how to do my homework, right? So that's what matters, is like, again, what are you programming for, right? If you're programming to learn, then obviously, right, you can do whatever you want to get by. If it's just like if it's something that's like doesn't make any sense at this point. Like I think the easiest example is like you're starting out on React, you might see hydration issues, and you're like, what is a hydration issue? I just want that off my screen so I can move on and figure out how to like center my div, okay? Like imagine this is like you're just starting out, right? Then I'm like, okay, there's two paths. You can either just like vibe code this and ask AI to fix a hydration issue, or this is the best opportunity for you to figure out what a hydration issue is. Right? Because think about it, right? If you're building this and you want to learn this and you have a problem that is killing you, then there is nothing else that will do you better service than a problem that won't go away, because years later you'll still remember how you solved that, right? And so that's what I think is like, there's the easy route and there's the route where you learn things. So both of these routes have their merits. You have to think about what, do you not have very much time, right? Considerations, right? But whatever the case, like, you just be conscious of how you're using AI. Just like, if you want to vibe code, go ahead. If you want to learn, you can. There are other ways, right? I guess, yeah.
100%. That's amazing. Yeah. No, I completely agree. That's very important. So something you said to me earlier really stood out, right? So you said Alex, you can trust him enough to review your peers and always find an error, and he prevents you from becoming complacent. And a lot of young people I see today, they sort of succumb to this complacency. How do you think they should avoid that, and they should just continue, pushing things out and never be satisfied?
It's such a hard question. I think it's really a matter of your personal philosophy. So here's what I mean by that, right? I can't point to a single moment in my life where I realized like how I learn. But I think that it's a progression that starts with like, okay, once I figure out that I think, maybe that, I don't know, this is when I'm like 5 years old, I realize that I have thoughts, okay? This is really big moments in, human evolution, is like humans figured out that they have thoughts. And then the next moments for me was figuring out how I learn. And I think that really changed for me, because like I realize now that like for me, I have like, that's how I developed my drive, because I realized that like how I learn is like I always want to know more. A lot of people have like Wikipedia rabbit holes. They go on, they want to find more and more detail. They're never satisfied with just knowing that something is true, right? They always want to find more, right? And so I think for me, it's like that sort of thing really got drilled into me when I was young. And I think that's the sort of layer that most people probably listen to this thing. Most of these people will probably like agree with. Like they also like are very curious about the world, right? Um, and then there's the other aspect is like on the aspect of like learning, right? Of not being satisfied with just learning the base minimum and like taking things for granted of how they are, right? I think a lot of people, like for example, will just hear this is an example. Like Grant Sanderson, so 3-1 Brown did a video about quantum computing, right? And he was like, a lot of people just hear the idea of qubits, right? And they'll just hear the understanding superposition of like 2 bits and stuff like that. That's the answer that they end up with. And very few people will go on and be like, but wait, what does that actually mean? Like, do I actually understand anything by saying that? Like, do I understand that? And personally, for me, I was like, no, I have no idea what that actually means, right? And so it's always that like, okay, there's something more that I haven't figured out yet. I really want to go deeper, right? How does all of that relate back to like the complacency thing, right? For me, it's like, it's in the same manner of like, you can just get something done, right? But there's the layer of like getting something done for the sake of a certain, deadline, a certain task, filling that sort of thing. And then there's the reason, there's the thing which it like sort of draws you into actually doing it, right? If, for example, it's like some homework you despise, obviously, then that's the sort of thing that like people just get by and like they don't care anymore. But if you're genuinely interested in it, and most people listening to this are interested in programming, right? Then you really got to think about why are you interested in programming in the first place, right? Like this isn't your homework, right? This isn't something that you despise. You really enjoy programming. So if you enjoy programming, then why does it, what kills you from doing more, right? If this is something that you genuinely enjoy, then what's stopping you from doing more of it, right? And so to me, the complacency issue is 2 things. One is like external pressures enforced upon you to get something done. If you just want to get something done for the sake of getting something done, then obviously that's when I just have to hit a deadline, I have to finish it, right? But if I have more time than that, if this is like a side project, for example, I have as much time as I want, and obviously high school students, you have as much time as you guys want, like that's when you really can dig deep as much as you can into anything you want. If you're really interested in programming, you can find out a lot more about these things, right? And so I think for me, what changed is me realizing that the way I learn is by doing things. For a lot of people, I think that is how they learn programming, is that they do things, right? And so all this ties together. How do you learn? You learn by doing things. You have an opportunity to do something, right? And you can choose to stop now, or you can choose to find out more. You can choose to put more effort into it, and by putting more effort, you'll learn more, right? If this is a hard thing for you to do, if you're struggling, right? That again is still a lesson to learn, right? And so all of these are all choices you can make. And again, I'm not saying everyone should dive deep into every single thing you'll do, because if you did that, you would have no time. But you should think about consciously, why am I doing these sort of things, right? And if it really benefits you, like for example, programming and not being complacent and peer reviewing your code, double checking your code, right? Or like even just diving deeper into like how the code works, figuring out how React works under a hood, all of these sort of things, right? Those are all mini nuggets of information you can pick up along the way. And it's really a matter of how deep you want to go, right? So, yeah, all of that.
Really, really good answer. That was fantastic. Okay, I think so. I want to move on to team building and management now. So,
Okay.
so let's turn back the clock a bit, right? So when you were in high school and you were moving, I guess, from, a lot of these like experimental fun projects, to actually building or actually building something like at a larger scale, like Eddie Beyond. Um, so in your experience, what was it like managing people? Was it like this very odd transition from, like I said, doing everything yourself as a singular coder, probably tinkering with, side projects, to running an entire team? So like, what was the experience like for you? And how'd you get used to these like people management skills?
I mean, I didn't manage people until this year actually. Like throughout high
Really?
school,
Okay.
I wasn't the lead developer. I
Wow,
was
okay.
sort of like I was on the team, and I was sort of on the team of 3 plus some other interns and stuff, right? On the
Okay.
side of management, I wasn't doing very much management, but I was figuring out how to lead people on the code side. So like for example, like the actual team lead didn't know how to like program a lot of web development, right? He was running the team, and so he was assigning people stuff, right? Fundamentally, the abstraction layer between idea and code wasn't there, right? And so I think for me, I had a lot of progress. I had a lot of practice doing that idea to code abstraction layer fixing. I had a lot of experience trying to take an idea from whatever management's or CEO, CTO tries to figure out, and trying to turn that into what the product looks like, right? What does that mean for the code? How should I architecture things? How should I get people on these things, right? That was the sort of, I guess, practice I had, right? And again, like I didn't manage a big team or anything. It's like as much of a similar to like a school project type where you have like several people working with you, and it's like that sort of thing. Right? It's not really that big, right? And I wouldn't say that I have a lot of experience managing hundreds of people, right, or even dozens of people, right? But I think for me, it's like I naturally had an inclination to want to take things a certain direction. Be that a good direction or not, I think that's where I need people like Alex or my other co-founders and stuff to like really pin me on these things, because I always like really want to dig all the way down and be like, why are we doing this? Why are we all doing this? And then trying to like figure all that all the way to the top, and like really understanding that for me, right? When I really understand that, that's how I'm able to like manage these people, because then I see the bigger picture. When I see the bigger picture, I'm like, okay, I need certain people this. I need certain people this. I only have time for this, right? I think the other thing is like, I use a lot of technologies, right? Like Notion, we used to use. I think now we are on linear, right? GitHub has actions. I run everything on Discord. It's like a very classic startup stack, right? All these technologies work together, and I think like figuring out how these technologies work, obviously they'll help you, right? And so there's a lot of stuff there. I think there's a lot of ways that you can improve management skills. I will not say by any means I am like I'm a management king. I hate Scrum. I hate sprints. I hate any of that stuff. If you ask any of my employees, they'll probably say like I barely manage them, and I think that's the goal. I think the goal, it's like for a lot of people. I don't know if you play Minecraft Skyblock, but there's a reference like the goal of Skyblock is to never play Skyblock. I think the goal of management is to never have to manage someone. It's like if you can build a team where they can figure things out, you do minimal management. That's the goal.
Right. Your autonomy. I love it. Yeah, no, that's a very consistent motif and everything you're saying, and I totally resonate with it. So, and we were discussing this briefly a while ago as well, but how do you sort of, as a young person, prevent yourself from going into this pure, like, technical mode? Like, as you were saying, and this kind of connects back to self-esteem as well. You were, finding it difficult to even narrate a script when, like, you weren't even on camera, and now you're speaking so eloquently and articulate, right?
Thank you.
So how do you develop those more so interpersonal skills, and how do you like go beyond just coding or any niche for that matter?
I mean, it's tough. I think for me, a lot of things were by trying and failing. So one big thing for me was realizing that the world existed beyond my high school. I think that was big for me because of, for example, I worked on a documentary through high school. That documentary, it's now on YouTube. It doesn't have very, very many views, but it's a good documentary. Maybe you'll link it or something. I don't know. Anyways, while I was doing the documentary, what really stood out to me was that I realized I could reach out to people by email. And like, all of us like Gen Zers or Gen Alphas, I don't even know. I'm scared that there's Gen Alphas on the server. But like, all of us, we're so used to Discord. We're so used to like social media. We forget that like the experts, a lot of the times are on email, right? One cool thing about me being in that dorm specifically is that dorm was where Sam Altman lived. He actually, I think he's class of 2000 something, 2002 or I don't know, something like that. One of my friends, programmer friend, he literally just reached out to him. He was like, through the Stanford email, he was just like, hey Sam, which dorm did you live in? And he was like, oh, I lived in like blank, which floor or something like that. And they just had some conversation, right? And like that realization, that was cool. When I was working on that documentary, I think I reached out to like the Bureau of Land Management. I reached out to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I reached out to like the Nature Conservancy. And all these groups that like, sound high, like they're all like so high, whatever, right? I was like grade 11. I was maybe 15, 16 at the time, like researching this thing that, again, this is part of my thing. It's like I want this documentary is about like American history, right? Like there's nothing to do with programming, right? But I still like spent so much time on it. Regardless, right? That inspiration that I realized, oh, these people actually reach out. These people actually respond. I sent them these things. I didn't expect them to respond at all. And they were so enthusiastic. They were so happy that this 15-year-old kid from Canada was suddenly interested in American history, specifically like their American history. So they were like so happy with like responding. So I started doing interviews with them, right? And I think like fundamentally like talking to someone is much easier than like responding to scripts. I think like if I were to like read off a script, I would still take forever, right? But like I think practicing these sort of things and realizing that you can like really reach out to these people and they will respond, right? And that's the coolest part. And then coming here, I think on my first couple of days, I was like so antisocial. I remember like on international student orientation, we had like 6 hours of like straight just talking. I was so tired. Like I think my social battery ran out in like an hour or something like that. Like think about it. Like I'm a programmer. Like I don't talk to people very much, right? Like there's the old joke that's like you can tell a programmer is an extrovert if they look at your shoes and not your own, right? But anyways, like that was literally me. I was literally just like looking at other people's shoes, like just like barely talking about myself, right? But I really think that like I think at that time, right, being forced to be in that situation with a bunch of like unknown people that are also probably like slightly worried. Everyone's worried, right? But as sort of shared thing and like wanting to find out more about people comes a classic of like, what's your name? What's your major? Where are you from? That sort of thing, right? But beyond that, having deeper conversations with these people. And I think our orientation was like a week total or something like that. It's quite a long orientation. And it's a lot of time to be spending talking to new people, right? So I think that really changed it for me. That was one of the things that really changed it, where I was like, okay, I actually should, talk to new people, because the people you meet in orientation are the people that you're likely to, talk to for the rest of, whatever, right?
Right.
How does this apply elsewhere? If you're not in college, if you're just online, if you're on Discord, like what do you do, right? I think it's a lot of things. I think first is like, again, part of the if you're reaching out to like connect with people, like don't reach out because you want to connect. Like reach out if you genuinely just want to talk about something, right? And I think like a lot of times for me is like when I try to reach out just to talk to people because I felt like I was lonely or something like that, those conversations don't really go anywhere, right? A lot of the times, on the other hand, it's like if you just want to talk in a forum, like talk in the forum, right? That's like one of the best ways. I think like you can really just get feedback. You can like get to know people, recognize you, and it's not as awkward as like a cold, DM or something like that on Discord, right? Once you just like build those connections, and then just like hanging out. A lot of like Discord servers these days have a lot of events, a lot of calls, a lot of like town hall meeting type things, right? If you're young, like Hack Club has a bunch of hackathons you can join. That's where you really meet people and you really get to work with them. Hackathons are so good for meeting new people. Right?
Yeah.
I think my best is like I met some friend. He came from Colombia, came for Tree Hacks for Hackathon, and like we worked together for 2 days. And then like a month later, I was like, "Hey, can I crash at your place in Colombia?" And he was like, "Sure." So I lived with him for 4 days, right?
Wow.
So like that sort of thing. You really meet a lot of people that way.
Forging those authentic connections. It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm not usually this lively at midnight.
Wow.
But I woke up at noon or something.
You want to do a rapid fire?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's do a rapid fire now. What is your favorite book about entrepreneurship or building?
I don't even know if I can think of a one. I think one thing that comes to mind is there's one, I think it was Sam Altman's. I think it was Sam Altman at YC. He did a YouTube video, and you can confirm this. You can put it up on the screen or something, like if you can find it.
Sure.
I think it is. He did a talk about startups, how like the pillars of what a startup is, from the idea to execution to time. I think that really matters, and I think I remember watching this in grade 11 or something like that, and that really stuck with me. Obviously, not enough that it came up automatically, but like I think that's one of the YC video, I think.
Okay, I'll look for it. All right, favorite music genre.
Cantonese pop, because my parents are from Hong Kong, and Cantonese pop is some of the deepest lyrically is some of the deepest stuff you can listen to. I really like it.
Tech stack you'd marry.
Tech stack I would marry. Scratch. I built a GPT wrapper with Scratch. It
What?
was so stupid. I
They have
connect
like,
I built bidirectional WebSockets with Scratch.
Jesus
It was
Christ.
so
I didn't know you could do
stupid.
that much with Scratch.
You can't. I have to use Turbo Warp. It's a
Oh, wow.
it's an external cloud variable because Scratch has cloud variables, except they shut it down because people
Oh,
are abusing it. But you can use cloud variables, and I wrote an event listener in Scratch, which is so stupid.
wow.
And I wrote an event listener on Python, obviously, and then I set it up so that Python can respond, and then Scratch cloud variables can only hold numbers. So I wrote a text to base 94 converter, and then the whole thing is so bad. It's so bad, but it works. It's,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
Anyways,
That's
okay.
that has to be one of the craziest things I've heard. Like at all on Builder Talks. Okay. Dream dream dinner guest, living or dead, who isn't in tech.
Ooh. So many come to mind. I'll say, you might not know, you actually might know, Ramanujan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Srinivas
The
Ramanujan, yeah.
mathematician. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Him. For many,
May I
many
ask
reasons,
why?
but you can probably expect, because he entered a space that was not traditional, and he excelled in it in ways. Obviously, he's brilliant, right? But he was
Right.
able to find connections in a way that most traditional people did not see. And I feel like
Right.
that has to have a metaphor. If you think about like the way people learn these days, it's so standardized. I'm so curious if like there are lessons to think about for people learning in non-traditional ways. It's so interesting.
Right. Wow, okay. I mean, this really is a great segue to my next question, and I'll admit this is a cliche, but what's a mainstream view that you disagree with?
Ooh. Ah.
Doesn't have to be in tech.
I know. I'm trying to think about some stuff. I think that the view that there are certain, like, there are certain news sources or there are websites that just don't teach anything. I think that there are always things to learn from things if you understand context. And I think this comes back all the way to critical thinking. But I believe that, like, even if you watch Fox News and you think Fox News is stupid, there are
Right.
still so many things you can learn about, for example, how a company is structured, why they
Right.
might choose to air certain news stories and not, right? Context about the people presenting it, about things that they present and things that they don't present. Those are all things you can learn, and it requires you to critically think for you to learn. I think that is probably something I can say, like, applies to anything you can ever say. There's always something to learn beyond what is just written there.
I love it. Okay, one last question for this very, very long but very exciting interview. At the end of your career, what's one problem you want people to remember you for solving?
And this is something that programming is not good for. And I want people to think deeper about the world that they live in. But I do think that fundamentally, if there's anything I can solve, it is helping people think deeper about what they're consuming, whether
Consuming,
it's the
yeah.
internet, whether it's not. I really want people to think. That's it. That's it.
I love it, yeah. No, I mean, there's just so much disinformation that goes on today, it's crazy. This was fantastic, Hinson. I mean, this was really one of the best
Yay!
conversations we've had
Yay!
on the podcast so far. I'm so happy we did this.
Great.
Hopefully, in our next episode, we can get like Alec and friends on
Dude,
with you.
I
Uh,
remember like when I think it was Neb,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
told Alex or something, and Alex was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
doing a portrait. Okay, I'm gonna get Alex on this thing. At the very least, you should talk to him because he's kind of funny. He has
Yeah,
funny views
sure,
about things.
sure, sure.
Um,
I love that,
yeah.
and he's been a
Anyways,
Builder Group member for some time as well, I believe. So
but
that'll be fun.
he invited me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hinson, for coming on. This was absolutely incredible. Um, yeah, see you soon. Guests, please stay tuned for more Builder Talks coming soon.